anything else in the world? He says, yes. He says, okay, Dad, then will you please have a bris? Now, you see, this Baal Tshuva, this person's grandfather, that Holocaust survivor, was so angry with Hashem that he never even gave his son a bris. And now that father of the boy was caught in a bind because he had already refused his son one thing, but he promised him that he'll do whatever else he asks him. So he said, okay, if you really want, I made a promise, I keep my word, you can organize the bris. And so that was organized. That a week later, there's a organization that does adults bris with all the different things. And he went through the bris and he was recuperating. It seems that having that bris transformed him, changed him a little bit, to the degree that he phoned up his son and he said, you know what, even though I'm still recuperating and in a lot of pain, I'm ready to come to the wedding. And so he did. He loved the chuppah. It was really very beautiful. He went to the wedding, but he couldn't walk properly. He was in a lot of pain. And he's sitting at the table. His face is glowing. He's clapping. He's so full of simcha, but he is caught by the table. He can't dance. He can't get up. So a guy comes over to him. He says, you know, I'm the caterer here. Why don't you look so lebedik? Your face is glowing. Why are you celebrating so much? He says, this is my son's wedding. He says, then why aren't you dancing? He said, well, because I just had a bris and I can't. The caterer looks at him very closely and he says, don't move, as if he could have, but I have something special for you. And he comes out. This is years after the Rebbe had left the physical domain. And he brings $1 of the Rebbe. And he says to him, you know, I've had this extra $1 lying with me, waiting for recipient. And since it's your son's wedding, and since it's your bris, I'd like you to have it. And as he places it into the hand, this father just faints. They revive him again. He faints again. This time they revive him and say, what's going on? He says, guys, you won't believe it. Many years ago, when the Lubavitch Rebbe was still alive, I had a friend who came to visit me in New York. And he said, do you know, there is this rabbi who hands out dollar bills and blessings. Why don't we go to him? Why don't we just see? And so I let myself be convinced. I came with my friend to 770 on a Sunday. We stood in the line for dollars. My friend was in front of me. The Rebbe gave him the dollar bill and answered, Bracha v'atzlacha, gave him the blessing. Then the Rebbe looked at me. He put the dollar bill into my hand. And the minute it touched my hand, he pulled the dollar bill back. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, when you have a bris, I will give you my $1. I never saw the Rebbe again. 1994 came. And can you believe the prophecy of the Rebbe? Here we are standing. Many years later, I just had my bris and the Rebbe kept his promise. He sent me the dollar bill that he promised. My friends, this is your Aleph Nissan. It is a time to reconnect to the Almighty, to the Rebbe. When the Rebbe was asked, how can you connect to me? How do you want to be connected to me? Learn what I learned. The Rebbe said, when I walk in the street, I chazot Tanya by heart. I learn Chitas. I learn Rambam. learn my mamorim, my discourses, my siches. Today, there's so many opportunities on the YouTubes, on all to do it. In this way, we are reconnected with the Rebbe. The Rebbe has done so much to transform the world, and yet he owes us a promise. His promise was that in our generation, we will see Mashiach. Let us do what we have to and pray that the Rebbe's promise, that God's promise of Ani Mamin, Bevias HaMashiach, will be fulfilled. We will be able to see and rejoin the Rebbe. My friends, we are very, very fortunate to have a distinguished guest, Mr. Natan Sharansky, Dr. Natan Sharansky. Everybody knows him as the famous refusenik. He was in the Knesset. He was the head of the organization of the World Zionists. And we have the pleasure that he is going to address us for this important occasion. Please, everybody, give him your attention. Thank you. Good Yom Tov, Mazel Tov. Rabbi Masinta.
Okay, guys, it's all very challenging this evening, and most important of all, I think this is what exile is all about: living with the challenges, with how you plan an evening. But we've got problems with the inverter tonight. As you know, there's load shedding all over Johannesburg. So while we are waiting,
Make a plan.
I'm making a plan. While we are waiting to go on to Natan Sharansky, maybe it's just worthwhile for me, unprepared, just to go through a few of the Rebbe's campaigns. Number one, 1960. Maybe Alex, you want to do it? You'll do a better job.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So do it with me. In 1967. The Rebbe comes out with Mitzvah Tefillin. Now, if you have to understand how strange that was at the time. Mitzvah Tefillin, nobody is putting on Tefillin. And
not nobody.
Well, you know,
were.
You're right. But it was rare though. And the Rebbe came here and he said, you got to get people to put on Tefillin. The Chabad worldwide on trains and planes got people to put on Tefillin. And then the Rebbe came out with another campaign that people should have Jewish books in the home. It should be overflowing with Jewish books. And then in 1973, the Rebbe came out with a campaign that young girls, unmarried young girls from the age of 3 should light Shabbos candles, and married women and young girls should make sure to light Shabbos candles on time, 18 minutes before sunset. To light Shabbos candles after sunset is an appalling desecration of the Shabbos. And today, worldwide, young girls are lighting Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe said the additional light, or if you take the acronym for the words Neirish Shabbos Kodesh, it reads Neshek. Neshek is ammunition. The ammunition of the Jewish people is Shabbos candles, light, which dispels the darkness and the negativity and the hatred of the world. And then the Rebbe came out with Miftzah Mezuzah. And if I'm not mistaken, in 1976, at the time of Entebbe, the Rebbe said they checked all the mezuzahs of all the hostages' homes, and they found that the mezuzahs were not kosher. And the Rebbe said it's not like that. It doesn't mean to say that if you have a mezuzah that's not kosher, something bad is going to happen. Or if you have all your mezuzahs, nothing's going to happen. The Rebbe said it's like wearing a helmet in the time of war. It's an added protection. And then the Rebbe came out with Miftzah Ahavas Yisrael, love of a fellow Jew, to care about somebody. And a soul can descend to this world for 70 or 80 years just to do a favor for another person. In fact, when there was huge tension between the West, between America and Russia in the 80s, the Rebbe said that before davening in the morning, we should fulfill the custom of the Arizal to take upon ourselves, that before davening, we should say the words, I hereby take upon myself the mitzvah to love a fellow Jew as myself. Why? Because the Jewish people, if you put infrared glasses on, we're all one soul. And when we fight with each other, we're allowed to disagree with each other. But when we fight, when we backstab, we're actually separating ourselves from each other. So the Rebbe said that by taking upon ourselves that mitzvah, we'll bring unity. God blesses us when we are one. God can't rest upon us. Bracha can't rest upon us when there is hatred and backstabbing, etc., etc. And then the Rebbe came out with a mitzvah called Torah, that people should make a point to learn Torah every day. Today, it's so easy. There's a whole bunch of apps, and we keep sending them out. There's a whole bunch of apps to allow people to enable people to learn Torah. You can go to ChabadSouthAfrica.org or Chabad.org. There's a variety of shurim in the hundreds of shurim in the city, in Johannesburg and in Cape Town, etc., etc. And the Rebbe came out with chinuch. Make sure that your kids learn Torah, proper Torah, to go to an authentic Jewish school. And then, of course, the Rebbe came out with mikveh, family purity, that to keep the laws of family purity brings blessing, not only spiritually, but also physically as well. Later on, the Rebbe came out with the mitzvah of Rambam. And Rambam is interesting because the Rambam lived about 900 years ago. And the Rambam was the first person who codified the whole of Jewish law from beginning to end in a very simple form. And he left out all the arguments of Jewish law, and he just brought the law from beginning to end. He was the only sage who covered Jewish law from beginning to end, even the laws that are only applicable when Mashiach comes or when the temple stood in Jerusalem. And the Rebbe said, by learning that, not only do you learn the entire Torah, but there's a unity. Jews throughout the world are learning it all together. And then, of course, before Pesach, the Rebbe wanted people to have handmade shmura matzah. And if anybody...
And tzedakah, and buy a smaller
Oh, you do it, hold it. I'm going to give it over to you to finish. Now, Alex is going to finish them. Okay. Over to you, Alex.
No. Well, the Rebbe also said that we should give tzedakah, and everybody should have a pushka. Rabbi Masinta made those arcs, which is a beautiful way. You should have a pushka in every place, in your home, in your car, and give it and teach your children to do it. He also told us to have a bayis molei svarim, a house filled with holy books, at least a chumash, a tilim, and a siddur. The Rebbe also came out with kashrus, that we should kosher our homes, and Baruch Hashem, the Chabad house has a wonderful way of making all that. So the 10 mitzvahs are: 1, to light Shabbos candles for all women. Actually, men should also light if there's no women in the house, but a girl over 3 should light 1, and married women should light 2. The second is tefillin, as Rabbi Masinta discussed. The third is having kosher mezuzahs on your doorpost. The fourth is studying Torah, as he discussed. The fifth is giving tzedakah. The sixth is to have the house filled with holy books. The seventh is kashrus, to make sure your home is kosher and to keep kosher. Number 8 is avas yisrael, that Rabbi Masinta said, loving your fellow Jew. Number 9 is proper chinuch, that we should give our children the Jewish education. And number 10 is taras mishpacha. I'd like to point out that the Rebbe also pointed about family purity, that even a woman who has already finished the cycle that women go through and doesn't need to go to the mikveh every month, she should at least go once after she's finished the cycle. And that way, every time she has intimacy, she is fulfilling a mitzvah rather than the opposite. And then, as Rabbi Masinta added, the Rebbe told us to learn Rambam, either 3 chapters, 1 chapter, or the Sefer Mitzvahs, the Mitzvah Matzah, and all the others that Rabbi Masinta will talk about.
And now we're going to go on to Natan Sharansky.
Beautiful.
So, dear friends, thank you for inviting me. I was born in 1948 in the city of Donetsk, then Stalino, Donbass, Ukraine, Soviet Union. Of course, today it is the center of the awful, brutal war which Russia imposed on Ukraine. But if in those years that I was growing there, somebody will tell me that the next war will be or between Ukrainians and Russians, or between the inhabitants of our Earth and Mars or some other planet, I would say, of course, it will be the war between 2 different planets. Because to imagine for a moment that this empire of Soviet Union, there can be war between these 2 people who are major part of this empire, Russians and Ukrainians, was unimaginable. In fact, there were hundreds of nations in Donbass, first of all, Ukraine, and then the Russians and Kazakhs and Georgians and Armenians and many others. But it wasn't really so important because national life was undermined, was oppressed in the Soviet Union. The only nationality which was important was Jewish, because if the word Jew is written in the ID of your parents, then you're subject of a lot of persecutions, discriminations. In fact, I would say that the only Jewish thing which we had in our life was anti-Semitism. We had no Jewish language, no Jewish tradition, no Jewish religion, no place where you learn about it, no knowledge about Hanukkah or Purim, about Brit Milah or Bar Mitzvah. These words didn't exist in our life. We were absolutely assimilated, second generation, absolutely assimilated Soviet Jews. Of course, later, much later, I found out that even in those days of the absolute Iron Curtain, there were some small groups of Hasidim with Shlichim, Rebbe, who succeeded to reach, even to go even through Iron Curtain. They were in Moscow, they were in Tashkent, Samarkand, some other places, but we knew nothing about it. We, a huge community, I was in the city of 500,000 people, probably 50,000 of them were Jewish, and we lived and knew nothing about our Jewishness. And we had no identity and no freedom. Of course, we knew very well that it's not free country. I remember the day when I became loyal Soviet citizen. It was the day when Stalin died. And my father told me, it is very good for us, for Jews, that Stalin died. We are really saved from very big dangers. Remember all your life that in the moment of big danger to Jews, miracles happened and Stalin died. But he said, don't tell it to anybody, do what everybody does. And I, in my 5 years, go back to kindergarten. And I cry together with all the people about children, about death of Stalin. And I sing songs about the greatness of son of all the people, Stalin. And I remember that it's good for us, for Jews, that he died. And I have no idea how many of the children are really crying or how many of them are crying like me because father told us to do it. So that is a typical life of Soviet citizen, of double thinker who has double life. We do what we are expected to do. We vote as we are told. We read the books which are permitted, and we know that it's all lie. But the real life is only for your family and for few friends around. And you remember that you're Jew. You are born with such a disease called Jew. There is nothing positive in it, but you have to learn how to live with this. And the only way to live with this, as your parents explained, is to be the best in your profession. And professional success can help you with it. To think that maybe you should fight for your right to say what you really think, for your freedom, you're not thinking, because there are no values in your life except of one. This value is your survival, your physical survival. And the way for this is your professional career. So it was very uncomfortable, boring life of double think, of permanent life. And when it changed when the message came from Jerusalem. When in 1967, when Jerusalem was reunited, in fact, it united us with Jewish people. How it happened? It happened because suddenly people around you, those who like you, those who hate you, anti-Semites and friends, they all look on you and say, how you guys did it? This 6-day war, it's such a huge humiliation for Soviet Union. Superpower who gave so much money and weapons in order to guarantee the destruction of Israel. And suddenly Israel emerged victorious, and all the people around me asking, how you Jews did it? And I understand that by the I want to know, but for people around me, I am a Jew who is connected somehow to Israel. And to understand this mystical connection, I started reading in the underground, together with many other Jews, from the books which were brought by the tourists. We started reading, in fact, about ourselves, about our history. And suddenly you discover that if you only make some switch in your mind, your history will start not from Bolshevik communist revolution 50 years ago. It will start from Exodus from Egypt. And it's such a unique history. It's such an inspiring history, such an interesting history. And then you find out that there are Jewish people, all these people who are coming as tourists from America, from London, from Paris, from Sydney. They tell them, oh, your father is from Odessa. And my father, my grandfather, my uncle is from Odessa. We are family, we want to help you. You find out that all these Jewish people from all the world, they're all from Odessa. They're all from one shtetl. They say we are family. And of course, there is the state of Israel, which is ready to send airplanes to the end of the world, but to help you. And that's how you discover your identity. That is the first step. And the moment you have a history, you have people, you have country that you want to be part of it, that gives you strength to start speaking your mind. And the first phrase you say, I really don't want to live here. I want to be with my people in my country. And that's how you start your struggle. The moment you say it, of course, you lose everything. You lose your career. It's the end of your career. You are fired from your work. You'll be interrogated by KGB. Your house will be searched. But you start speaking freely your mind, and you can learn now about your history. Then you discover the world of faith and the world of Jewish connection, of Jewish solidarity. That gives you a lot of strength. Well, of course, we in our struggle in the Soviet Union could never succeed even one day if it was not a struggle of all the Jews, of all the Jewish organizations. When we are having demonstration of 10 people in Red Square and we are arrested next day, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world are going to their demonstrations, go to their centers, demand from their governments to act, and Senate pass their laws linking our fate with the interests of Soviet Union. That's how our struggle was developing. And later, when I was arrested and accused in high treason, and KGB tried all the time to convince me that I'm alone, that I'm abandoned, that Jews of the world are afraid even to mention my name, I knew that's a lie, because I saw the power of this Jewish connection, Jewish solidarity, when we are together rediscovering our history and our faith, how it unites us and gives all our strength to fight and to be responsible for one another. And I was absolutely sure that Jewish people will never abandon me and will never stop fighting them. And that's what gave me a lot of strength. Then, the bringing down of the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union was a huge victory, first of all, of Jewish solidarity. And then, as a result, not only I, not only the other Jewish activists, but 1 million Jews left Soviet Union and came to Israel. Another 500,000 Jews came also to the other countries. And I have to say that Shlichim Shel Rebbe, who were reaching Soviet Union in even the most difficult days of the Iron Curtain, even during Stalin's repressions. I don't know any other Shlichim who were really reaching Soviet Union and building there some very small communities which kept this light of Jewish spirit alive. But the moment Soviet Union fell apart and there was freedom of communication, I have to say that that Shlichim Rebbe were those who, in hundreds, went to the most God-forsaken places in Russia, in Ukraine, in Kazakhstan, and rebuilt Jewish life, brought back to Jewish life so many lost souls. And to say, today, unfortunately, we are in difficult days. This barbaric aggression of Russia, which tries to rebuild the former empire to Ukraine, created the flood of refugees, millions and millions of refugees from Ukraine. Among them, thousands and thousands of Jews. The whole communities of the whole orphanages, some schools were on move to Israel or to some places in Europe. And there is a huge operation on the borders of Ukraine, in Hungary, in Romania, in Moldova, and first of all in Poland. There are representatives of different organizations of Jewish Agency of Israel, but also many Jewish organizations who are trying to help. And I think what an irony, when I was growing in Donetsk in Ukraine, it was not really important what nationality is written in the ID of your parents. Important was only one. If it is Jew, you are chosen for bad treatment, for the worst. Today, when there's millions of refugees moving from different cities of Ukraine to Lviv or to the borders of Ukraine and then to Europe, it is only one nationality, Jewish, that is chosen. They're chosen for the better, because it is only one nationality which they know when they are reaching the borders, there is a country, there are people, there are organizations who are waiting for them, who are taking care of them, who are thinking about them. That is the great change which happened when Israel came to our life and when we discovered our Jewish identity, our connection with our people. So yes, it is a big challenge also to Shlichim Shel Chabad today in Ukraine to help to the communities to overcome these difficult days. It's a challenge for the Shlichim of the Chabad in Russia to keep their communities in contact with the Jewish world and with all the world, just at the time when, unfortunately, new iron curtain of informational iron curtain. Isolation is falling on Russia. So to keep our people connected to one another, to Jews of the world, and to the state of Israel, that's a great challenge. And Shlichim of Chabad are always at the forefront of meeting this challenge. Thank you.
Natan, thank you so much for making yourself available this evening. We want to thank you for doing this. And please, God, as we celebrate in a few days the festival of Pesach, as tonight we celebrate the Rebbe's 120th birthday, please, God, in merit of Jewish identity and Jewish awareness, may we have the revelation of Mashiach immediately. Lashana haba Yerushalayim.
Lashana haba Yerushalayim. Pesach kasher u'sameach.
Amen. To you. Once again, thank you, Natan Sharansky. Rabbi Moshe Brisky, who's on now, is one of the most well-known rabbis in California. He's a great teacher, he's a great orator, but most important of all, he is a very, very special chassid of the Rebbe. And Rabbi Brisky is going to speak to us on the Rebbe's influence on not just the Jewish world, but the world at large. Rabbi Brisky, I know your time is very short this evening. Thank you for making the time. And Mazel Tov on the Simcha that you had in Cape Town just a week ago. But over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to Natan Sharansky, one of my heroes. I've read all of your books, and the inspiration you have given the Jewish world is immense. Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on the legacy of the Lubavitcher Rebbe on this, his 120th birthday. It also gives me an opportunity to celebrate Yud Aleph Nissan a little bit earlier, because by us it's still Monday afternoon. By you it's already the evening. So now that I'm with you, it's already Yud Aleph Nissan. So a mazel tov to the Rebbe on his birthday. I also want to say a quick shout out hello to my son and daughter-in-law, the Chassan and Kala, that I'm sure are on the Zoom, to Yossi and Talaya. Mazel tov, and to my mechutin, Rabbi David Weinberg and his Rebbetzin. Yashikayach for the hospitality you and your entire community showed me the last few weeks. Early on in the Rebbe's leadership, this would be in the mid-1950s, there was a group of college students that had an audience with the Rebbe. And one of the college students says to the Rebbe, tell me, I know you're the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I've heard about you, but if you don't mind me asking, what do you do in this small office? You would think that the leader of a movement so large would have this massive office with a huge room of staff. And the Rebbe's office is very simple, very modest, very humble. So what do you do here all day, Rebbe? The Rebbe smiled. He appreciated the honesty of the question. And he pointed to a light switch on the wall. And he says to the student, what is that? And the student says, that's a light switch. Okay. So the Rebbe explains, that light switch is connected by electrical currents, by a wire that is connected all the way to downtown Brooklyn. And there is a big generator. And the generators are connected by electrical wires all the way to Niagara Falls. At Niagara Falls, the falls are churning these wheels that are producing this electrical current, and this tremendous energy goes through these wires. But because the energy is so great, it needs to be toned down a bit. It needs to be diminished as it goes from Niagara Falls to downtown Brooklyn. And from Brooklyn, it gets toned down some more and sent through the wires under the streets, all through Brooklyn. And then they come into this building. And then the wires go into this wall, and it attaches to that switch. You have all of this energy literally at your fingertips. But all you have to do is flick the switch, and then you have light. So with all that energy coming all the way from Niagara Falls, all this powerful energy coming all the way to that switch, if you don't turn the switch on, you don't have light. The Rebbe continued, just like this light switch, God gives the soul of every Jew a light switch that's connected directly to God. And all of the energy of God, which is infinite, is toned down so that it should be able to illuminate you, to help you. But if you don't know where the switch is, all the energy remains in the dark. So you ask me what I do here, you ask me what my job is. My job is to show every Jew how to find and turn on their switch. The Rebbe showed millions of Jews how to turn on their switch, how to kindle their neshama. Let's go back 50 years ago. The year is 1972. We're approaching Yud Aleph Nissan, 1972, the Rebbe's 70th birthday. Now, some well-meaning disciples or admirers or followers of the Rebbe wrote to the Rebbe suggesting that now that you're in the 70s, you have entered the years of the 70s, perhaps it's time to slow down your schedule a little bit. Stop putting in those long hours and investing so much of your health and well-being into this growth. You can take it a little easy. A vacation wouldn't be so bad. Now, they should have known better. As a matter of fact, in honor of his 70th birthday, the Rebbe said, you want to know what I would like for my birthday? I'll let you know. I would like 70 new Chabad institutions. Now, in 1972, that was unheard of. And yet, the Rebbe asks Hasidim find a way to deliver. And on the eve of that historic birthday, at a Farbrengen at 770 Eastern Parkway, the Rebbe was handed a list of the 70 new Chabad centers to be opened during the course of that year. The Rebbe was openly very pleased with his birthday gift. And at that gathering, there were a group of donors who came from California. They had also brought a list of the Chabad centers that they were going to open here in Southern California and throughout the state of California. They presented the Rebbe with a key to one of the new Chabad houses, And the Rebbe said to them, if you're giving me the key, then it becomes my house. I want the doors to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for anyone in need. And then the Rebbe added, you should know that what we're celebrating here tonight, the opening of 70 new institutions, this is going to become a pattern. Chabad is going to become like a chain store, that every community in the world is going to have one. Every single Jewish community is going to have its own Chabad center. And the donors that came, they chuckled, they smiled, they thought it was nice hyperbole. The Rebbe was saying every community will have. It's nice. But in the decades to follow, the Rebbe would continue to launch initiative after initiative, campaign after campaign, project after project, with the consistent underlying message that we must carry the torch forward. We must educate more children, reach out to more families, touch more lives, wherever they may be and whoever they may be. And that prediction that the Rebbe made 50 years ago would indeed be proven correct. No chain store has grown, no Macy's as we have here in the United States, or the chain stores you may have in South Africa has grown the way Chabad has grown over the past 50 years. There are close to 5,000 Chabad centers and institutions in the world today, and tonight in 770 Eastern Parkway they will publish a list of 1,200 new institutions that are being opened in honor of the Rebbe's 120th birthday. There is hardly a city, a town, or a village where Jews reside on the face of the earth where Chabad does not yet have a presence. The Rebbe's inspiration, the Rebbe's mandate continues to echo all across the global expanse. As Rabbi Telushkin, a great historian who published a book called Rebbe, he wrote that we are bearing witness to the greatest renaissance of Jewish life in history. Not in this decade, not in this century, in history. How did the Rebbe do this? The Rebbe did it one Jew at a time, one mitzvah at a time. Every single Jew to the Rebbe was an entire world. Every one of us was so critical to him. He answered our letters, he responded, and he challenged us further and further we must go. I remember a number of years ago, I spoke at a retreat in the state of Virginia, and I was part of a panel of speakers, and one of the other speakers at that particular event was Mrs. Miriam Swerdlove, a great educator, lives in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And on one of the occasions that we weren't talking at the same time, I was able to sit in on her talk. And during her talk, it was a wonderful, inspiring, humorous talk. She challenged her audience with the following question. And she said, if you were to have a teenager living at home, and this teenager was going off to college, and you were concerned about their Yiddishkeit, their continuity of Judaism, and you were able to give them one book, just one, what book would you give them? What's the one book you would give your son, your daughter, leaving home, the book that you would put your hopes on to say, keep the Jewish torch alive? And she challenged the audience. Everyone needed to give their answer. She said there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. She just wants to hear from the audience what they thought. And everyone stood up and gave a particular answer. You can think to yourself what your answer would be. One said a Siddur, a prayer book. One said a Chumash. One said the book of Tanya. One said Herman Wouk's book. One said Elie Wiesel's book. Everyone came up with some book that perhaps was important to them, that they thought that would be the book they would give over to their college student child who was leaving home. And when she finished going around the room, she said, I'll give you my answer now. And with that, she pulled up this little booklet. And she said, this is the one that I would give. I didn't recognize the booklet. I wasn't quite sure what it was that she was holding. It didn't look like a Siddur. It didn't look like a Chumash. It didn't look like a Bible of any sort. What was it? Turns out it was a list. It was a pamphlet that listed at that time all 4,000 Chabad centers located throughout the world. It was an address book with phone numbers. Do you know what this book tells you? She challenges the audience. Do you know why this is the book you would send with your child going away from home? Because this book tells you, and more importantly, it tells your child who's off to college or off to anywhere on this planet, that anywhere you go on this earth, you as a Jew are never alone. There is always a place you can walk right into and be welcomed with open arms and feel right at home. Think about it, she said. In more than 3,700 years of Jewish history, since the days of Abraham and Sarah, since the days of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel and Leah, we have never had a phenomenon like this, where a center of Yiddishkeit, a center of Judaism exists and is readily available, not only in every country in the world, but in every city, nook, and cranny in the world. So your child leaving home needs to know that wherever they find themselves, whenever they find themselves in need, they have a home. They have a rabbi and rebbetzin who's ready and willing to welcome them in as if it's their own home. You're away for Passover somewhere and you're feeling lonely, you have a Chabad center near you. It's Shabbat and you feel all alone, you have a Chabad center. It's a Tuesday night and you're feeling you need some inspiration, you have a Chabad center. Wherever you may go, it has never happened in Jewish history until today. Throughout his leadership, the Rebbe challenged us. One campaign after the next, and we heard earlier on the Zoom, the 10-point mitzvah campaign. And before the Rebbe suffered the stroke, the Rebbe left us, his Hasidim and his admirers and his followers, with one great final challenge. Finish the job. Bring Mashiach. I give this over to you now, he said to us. Finish the job. Now we understand quite clearly that everything the Rebbe set forth was with a real sense of mission and purpose. Nothing was poetic, nothing was theoretical, nothing was just philosophical. Everything to the Rebbe was actual and practical. And if the Rebbe gave us an initiative, if the Rebbe challenged us, if the Rebbe gave us a mandate, then by definition it meant that the project was doable in a very real and tangible way. The Rebbe was as down to earth as he was heavenly. Rabbi Groner of blessed memory, whose name was mentioned earlier, once told me that the Rebbetzin told him that before the Rebbe would initiate any campaign, he thought it through. And he would think it through over and over and over again, and then he rethought it again. And when he went through this exercise, which took days and at times weeks, the Rebbe would play out all the scenarios. He would think through every potential challenge and obstacle. And only after going through the entire process and thinking through every possible challenge that can come their way and coming up with the solution to the obstacles, would the Rebbe then announce it and launch it to the public. Every potential problem and sticking point had already been anticipated by the Rebbe. Any argument suggesting that it won't work was already debunked by the Rebbe. So that once the Rebbe says, go, take it, and run with it, we have no excuses, no acceptable excuses as to why it cannot be done. Going back to the early years of the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe would often share a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who lived in the 1700s. And this story that the Rebbe would told was about a cold and rainy night, and the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, they were sitting in the study hall, engrossed in their lofty mystical studies. Suddenly the door bursts wide open, and in comes running in this simple peasant wagon driver. The man was in a deep state of panic. "Help!" he cried out. "The wheels of my wagon are stuck in the mud and the horse is on his last legs. Help me dig this horse and buggy out of the mess before I lose my entire livelihood." And the Hasidim there, learning from the Baal Shem Tov that night, apologetically explained that things like horses and wagons and mud were not issues they get involved in, especially when they're heavily engrossed in spiritual pursuits. We would love to help you, but Moshish, we can't. And the desperate wagon driver yells back, Moshish, dan Choshish, which means can, you can. The question is, do you want to? Don't tell me you can't. Can, you can. Do you want to help me? The Baal Shem Tov stopped his lecture. He told his students that the message of the peasant was far more important, far more profound than any message they can get from his talk that night. Moshish Danya Choshish, can when always can. The question is, do you want to? This story was told by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on countless occasions, especially during the early years of the 1950s, the first years of his leadership of the Chabad movement. And at that time, the unspeakable pain of the Holocaust was all too fresh in the hearts and minds of world Jewry. The after effects of the physical nightmare led to spiritual disillusionment, causing so many of our people to drift away from their sacred heritage. At every opportunity, during every gathering, the Rebbe would exhort to his followers, we must reignite the sparks within the souls of our brethren throughout the world. We have to reach out to every single Jew on the face of the earth with love and with acceptance, and we have to inspire them with goodness and with the sanctity and holiness of the Torah. We have to strengthen their faith. We have to build schools and shuls and Chabad centers in every part of the world, wherever Jews may find themselves. At first, the Rebbe's cries were met with skepticism, if not outright rejection. Who are we? How are we to even attempt such ambitious and unrealistic endeavors? We're a bunch of orphans. If we'll be able to maintain our own family sense of Jewish identity and commitment, that would be miraculous. But to go out there into this dark, apathetic world and to seek to influence and to inspire others, we can't. And the Rebbe wouldn't hear of it. In a voice reverberating with passion and with urgency, he would quote the frustrated wagon driver in the Baal Shem Tov story, Moshish Danya Choshish, you can. The question is, do you want to? The Rebbe was also the most persistent of men. And in the days and the months and the years to follow, he would take his Hasidim by the hand and he would encourage them and assure them, you can, and therefore you must. The Rebbe called upon his Hasidim to share his vision for a brighter future for all, to seize the moment. He looked us straight in the eye and said, you can make a difference. You can change a community. You can change a world. Yes, even you teenagers, you can go out of Mitzrayim. Young couples in your 20s and your 30s, stand tall, strengthen yourself. Ufaratzta, go out, spread out. America, South Africa, Israel, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Australia, Asia, North America, East Coast, West Coast, go. Emboldened by this inspiration, first tens, and then hundreds, and then thousands of shluchim emissaries went forth upon every continent. And Chabad evolved into this vital worldwide network of schools, of Chabad houses and outreach centers spanning the globe. This vision that the Rebbe had, that he spoke about on his 70th birthday, and his boundless love and his relentless leadership rekindled the spirit of this post-Holocaust generation. Moshish da, yes, you can. And the same challenge is being asked of us today, of you and of me. We can celebrate the Rebbe's birthday by reminiscing, by watching inspiring videos, and we all will. Or we can do something tangible. We can take one of the Rebbe's mitzvah campaigns and incorporate it into our daily lives. We can live with the Rebbe. We can bond with the Rebbe. We can be the Rebbe's foot soldiers to finish the job, to take his challenge to us seriously every single day until the shofar blows. I'd like to conclude with one final story. Back in 1990, communism fell apart and Hungary gained independence from the Soviet Union. People suddenly had freedoms the likes of which they didn't have since 1956 when Russia invaded Hungary. For the first time in decades, people were able to make their own choices regarding the schooling of their children. And so, like everywhere else all over the former Soviet Union, Jewish schools began opening all over Hungary. One such school was opened in Budapest, and a team of American teachers and rabbis came to spearhead the effort. They placed ads in the paper hoping to start the school year with at least 50 children. On the first day of registration, 450 children and their parents showed up. The crowd was 9 times greater than they expected. Amazing. Contingency plans were made to accommodate the overflow registration. They divided the parents into different groups of 10 to talk about the school year. And during one of these discussions, the rabbi asked a question that was on his mind. Tell me, why are so many of you interested in sending your children to this school? Why, after so many years of not having religious education, do so many of you want to enroll your children here? The parents were a bit surprised by the question. What do you mean? It's obvious. Everyone had a different answer. Some spoke about the memories that they had when they were in Cheder. Some spoke about anti-Semitism in the schools. All this time, there's one man sitting in the back, and he's not joining in the discussion. And finally, the rabbi turns to him and says, and what's your answer? He says, I have a reason, but it's difficult for me to talk about it, but I'll try, so bear with me. I was a young child of 7 years old when the Nazis Yamach Shemam occupied Hungary in 1944. They knew that the war was almost over for them, but in their sick obsession to kill as many Jews as possible, they rounded up as many of us as they could to send off to Auschwitz. All Hungarian Jews were terrified. One night I'm lying in bed, and I hear my parents arguing frantically. I come down to hear what they're saying, but the door to the living room was closed. So I look through the keyhole to see what's going on. My father was very agitated. He said to my mother, look, we don't have to worry. No one knows we're Jewish. We don't look Jewish. We never did anything Jewish. We have no Jewish friends. What evidence would there be of our Jewish identity? We'll get away with it. To which my mother said, maybe there's a list somewhere. Maybe someone knows. Maybe someone will turn us in. So my father said, even if there is a list, and even if our name is on the list, and even if they come here, we'll just deny it. And the naivety that they had at the time. What would give them to think otherwise? They'll come into our apartment, they'll come into our house, they'll do a search, they won't find anything Jewish, and they'll leave us alone. At that point, he stops talking mid-sentence. And they both, my father and my mother, look at the bookcase. And they look towards the highest shelf. My mother walks over to the shelf and she takes down a book. It was a siddur. It was a prayer book. It was the siddur that her mother had given her on the day of her wedding. The same siddur that her mother's mother had given her mother on the day she was married. My mother took the siddur from the shelf. She leafed through the pages and tears begin running down her cheeks. She turns to my father, she looks at him, and I'm watching this through the keyhole, and my heart is pumping rapidly. She then looks at the burning fireplace, and she tosses the siddur into the fire. As the siddur was consumed by the flames, my mother falls to the floor in anguish. I ran upstairs, I threw myself onto my bed, and I cried like I never cried before. I cried and cried for hours. No, we had no Jewish friends. We never acted Jewish, never observed anything Jewish, never celebrated anything Jewish. And yet I knew in my heart that what I had just witnessed was an awful and terrible thing. I felt part of my soul had been ripped out of me, as if my family's journey had suddenly come to an end. In all of my years since, I have not been able to shake the pain of what I saw that night. In my mind, I always see those pages burning, and the tears just continue to come. And so you ask, why do I wish to send my child to this school? I'll tell you why. On the first day of school, I'm going to proudly walk into this building. I'm going to hold my son's hand. I'm going to walk into his classroom with him, and then I'm going to hand him a siddur. And my tears from that night will finally stop flowing. My dear friends, we live in a period of time that we have that freedom, we have the resources, we have the manpower that we can hand every Jewish child on the face of this earth a siddur, a matzah, a menorah. We can connect and inspire every Jew alive today. So let's go out there. Let's hand each and every single Jew on the face of the earth something that will attach them. Let's put tefillin on their hand. Let's give them a Shabbos candle. Let's lighten and brighten the world. Let's prepare the world for the coming of Mashiach. Let's answer the peasant's question. We can, and we want to, and we will. Thank you again for having me. A mazel tov on this Yud Aleph Nissan. We should indeed be zeicha to see the Rebbe back with us with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, which should happen immediately now.
Chaim l'chaim. Rabbi Brisky, it's David Weinberg here in Cape Town. We are broadcasting from the Chabad house in Cape Town. This national celebration of Yud Aleph Nissan, the Rebbe's 120th birthday. And it is so thrilling to once again be with you, even virtually this time. Thank you for the good wishes, and we reciprocate them. And Baruch Hashem, just last week, we were able to celebrate together here in Cape Town, where you took time off from your personal simcha to share and inspire Cape Town Jewry. And today you have conquered South African Jewry. Thank you for your heartfelt and passionate words, the capturing the Rebbe's essence in so many facets, but nothing more than the theme that we have heard throughout the evening, from Rabbi Mesinta's opening to Rabbi Karlebach's words to Natan Sharansky's inspirational perspective, going all the way back to the double speak of Russia, and capping off with Rabbi Brisky all the way in California, sharing with us the Rebbe's message. There is one consistent theme, and that is action. We have to do. If there's one institution that was the Rebbe's favorite, it was the heart and soul of every single Jew. That's another 15 million institutions. And each one of us here today, if we simply take on one of the things we've heard today, one mitzvah, one act, one mitzvah, one more step towards Mashiach, one more step in our own authenticity and connection to Hashem, as outlined here this evening, we will have built another and strengthened another institution and helped create and bring about the vision that we've heard about this evening, the Rebbe's vision, the vision of Yiddishkeit, the vision of Mashiach. May we experience it now, speedily, l'chaim.
I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and particularly to thank all of those incredibly inspiring talks that we had from Rabbi Karlebach, from Rabbi Brisky, of course from Natan Sharansky, to be able to hear these words about the Rebbe's leadership and the Rebbe's direction has been something really, really uplifting on this very, very special day. One of the ways that you can certainly help is, as you see there on the screen, if you help with some tzedakah, some much needed funds for the charity.com /Chabad Beyond for the work done by Shlomo Weiner, the incredible work that is done up and down the KwaZulu-Natal coast, and particularly in Umhlanga. So many people are so inspired by this incredible work. And now before Pesach, if you have the opportunity or you have the possibility to help out, that would be great. Also, remember to log on to unitedfortherebbe.com, unitedfortherebbe.com, where you can pledge something that you're going to be doing. And remember to click on Team South Africa, that together with all Jews around the world, that we're going to give the Rebbe a tremendous amount of nachas and a tremendous gift of things that we can do in honor of the Rebbe's special date tonight and tomorrow for Yud Aleph Nissan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. And we want to wish everybody a kosher and freilichen Pesach, a happy and a wonderful Pesach. And please God, with the Geula Hashlema, with the complete redemption. We just had a taste of redemption when we got out of Egypt. This is going to be the complete one. We look forward to it immediately and now. Thank you, take care, and have a good evening.